For 25 years, my husband broke my belongings when angry until I broke something important of his. Please leave a comment telling me where you're watching this story from. Let's continue. Good story. I'm standing in the middle of my daughter's rehearsal dinner venue, phone in my trembling hand. 200 guests staring at me in stunned silence. The video I just played on the massive screen behind me still glows there, frozen on my husband's sneering face, his voice echoing through speakers. My finger hovers over the Facebook Live button as Richard lunges toward me, his face purple with rage, veins bulging in his neck like thick ropes. At 68 years old, my hands are steadier than they've been in decades, even as my world explodes around me in spectacular, vindicating fashion. These hands, weathered and scarred from picking up broken china for a quarter century, finally know what it feels like to hold real power again. My name is Helen Margaret Foster, and for most of my adult life, I was invisible even when standing in the center of a room full of people talking. I built my entire existence around being small, quiet, unobtrusive, a shadow that moved through my own home like a ghost, asking permission to exist. Every careful step I took was calculated to avoid triggering the storm that lived inside my husband, the violence that lurked behind his charming smile. The loneliness wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone, until one day I looked up and realized something terrible. I had disappeared entirely, not in a visible way, but in every way that mattered. My thoughts, my feelings, my very self, erased bit by careful bit. Before I continue my story, I'd like to know who's on the other side listening to me. Comment your name and where you're watching from right now. And check if you're already subscribed to the channel. That helps me a lot to keep bringing these real stories to you all. Stories that need telling. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching across the world and touching lives. How did I get here? Standing in front of everyone I know, about to destroy the man I spent 25 years protecting from his own cruelty and violence. It started 3 weeks ago when his phone buzzed during our quiet Tuesday dinner, the screen lighting up with a message he didn't expect me to see. We were eating meatloaf, his favorite. The dining room filled with that comfortable silence that comes from decades of having nothing left to say anymore. I was clearing plates when his phone, face up on the table, as always because he had nothing to hide, right, lit up with the notification message. Last warning, Rich. Pay the 80 kk or we break more than your wife's dishes. The name at the top simply said, Tony, a number I didn't recognize at all. Richard grabbed the phone so fast he knocked over his water glass, ice cubes scattering across the mahogany table like scattered dice on felt. His face went white, then red, then white again, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Genuine fear, not anger, not the cold calculation I'd grown used to over years of walking on eggshells, but genuine terror. The kind from knowing you're caught. I stood there with the dirty plates in my hands, water dripping onto the carpet we'd picked out together 20 years ago, and I simply asked, who's Tony? The explosion I expected didn't come. Instead, Richard laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass, and said it was nothing, just a work thing, baby. But his hands shook as he typed the response, and when he looked up at me, I saw him calculating, weighing, deciding how much truth to actually tell. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch with the TV still playing some late-night talk show, I did something I'd never done in 25 years. I looked at his phone, something I'd convinced myself was a violation of trust, a betrayal of marriage vows, respect, everything I'd been taught mattered. His phone was still on the coffee table, unlocked because he'd passed out mid-scroll, and my hands trembled as I picked it up off the wooden surface. The text thread with Tony went back months, hundreds of messages about debts, payments, threats that grew increasingly specific and terrifying to read, but it was the other threads that made my blood run cold. Group chats with his brother and his college buddies, all of them talking about me freely. Rich, just pawn some of Helen's stupid sentimental junk. It's not like she'd even notice half of its garbage anyway, his brother had casually written. Richard's response, laughing emoji, already sold her grandmother silver last month. She thinks it's in storage. These women are so easy to fool, honestly. I sat on the bathroom floor, phone clutched to my chest, and felt something inside me that had been barely alive for years finally stop breathing entirely. The woman it had been, the one who believed love meant sacrifice, who thought keeping peace was noble, that woman died at 2:47 in the cold morning. What replaced her was someone I didn't recognize yet, someone cold and clear-eyed, someone who spent 25 years gathering evidence without realizing it. Over the next week, I played the role I'd perfected over decades. Dutiful wife, asking no questions, making his meals, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But in the quiet hours when he was at work, I searched, and what I found was so much worse than stolen silver or gambling debts with loan sharks. Bank statements hidden in his locked desk drawer, the one he thought I didn't know he kept the key for in his golf bag, showed systematic financial theft. Our retirement account, the one we'd built together for 30 years, saving carefully, sacrificing vacations and luxuries, was almost completely drained, empty. $340,000 gone, drained over 5 years in increments small enough that I wouldn't notice the statements it had redirected online. The mortgage on the house, our house, the one we'd raised our children in for decades, had been refinanced twice, equity stripped out and gambled away completely. Life insurance policies I didn't know existed with me as the insured and Richard as the beneficiary, purchased 8 years ago for $500,000 each policy. My hands didn't shake anymore as I photographed every document, uploaded everything to a cloud account he didn't know I had. Methodical, cold, determined now. The paper trail told the story of a man who'd been planning not just gambling away our future, but actively constructing my irrelevance, my complete erasure. Then I found the folder on his laptop, the one password protected but not well enough to keep me out, labeled simply H plans, and my world tilted. Videos, dozens of them. Richard and his brother Carl sitting in our garage, drinking beer, laughing as they plotted to sell our house from under me. She'll crumble like her damn teacups, Richard said in one video, dated 6 months ago. Just tell her it's for the kids' inheritance planning purposes. Get her to sign the quitclaim deed, Carl responded. She's so scared of conflict she'll do anything to keep the peace. Always has been like that forever. Once the house is in your name only, we refinance again, take out another $200K, then file for divorce. She gets nothing, my brother continued cheerfully. Richard laughed, that same laugh it had heard 1,000 times at family dinners, while opening Christmas presents, while holding our beautiful grandchildren lovingly. Best part, he said, leaning back in his lawn chair with a satisfied smile. She's so beaten down, she'll probably apologize for causing all the trouble. I watched all 47 videos over the course of 3 days, each one more devastating than the last. A complete autopsy of my marriage, my entire life. They mocked everything, my weight gain after the kids were born, my habit of saving greeting cards, the way I cried during sentimental movies on TV, my love for them, for my family, for the life I thought we'd built together. It was all just ammunition they'd stockpiled for when I wasn't useful. The thing about being underestimated for 25 years is that people forget you have a brain. They forget you're capable of thinking, planning, taking action. Richard had trained me so well to accept destruction, to clean up his messes, to apologize for his anger, that he'd stopped seeing me as any threat. Every broken plate I'd swept up, every shattered picture frame I'd replaced, every tear I'd cried in the bathroom alone. He thought those meant I was broken. But broken things can be the most dangerous because they've already survived the worst. They've learned that destruction isn't the end of absolutely everything. The weight of that discovery settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable, the kind of truth that changes the very air you breathe. I found myself looking at Richard across the dinner table that week, watching him chew his food and complain about work, and seeing a complete stranger. This man who I'd given my youth to, my body, my trust, my entire adult life, had never loved me at all. I was always just a mark to him. How long had he been like this, I wondered? Was he always this cruel, or did I somehow turn him into this monster by being too weak, too compliant? But no, I realized as I reviewed those videos again and again, his cruelty was calculated, deliberate, a strategy he'd perfected over our entire marriage together. He hadn't broken my grandmother's china in fits of uncontrollable rage. He'd broken them to remind me of my place, to keep me small and fearful always. Every shattered vase, every smashed picture frame, every destroyed keepsake from my mother, they were all tools of control, weapons he'd wielded with surgical precision. And he'd accepted it year after year, making excuses, believing his apologies, convincing myself that this was just what marriage looked like after the honeymoon. My mother had warned me, hadn't she? All those years ago when I announced my engagement, she'd seen something in Richard that I was too in love to notice. He's too charming, she'd said, smoothing my hair back like I was still a little girl. Men who are that charming are usually hiding something very dark inside. I dismissed her concerns as old-fashioned cynicism, defended Richard passionately, assured her that he loved me truly and would never hurt me like she feared. She died 10 years ago, never knowing how right she'd been, never seeing her daughter reduced to a frightened shadow in her own beautiful home. Sometimes late at night, I'd imagined what she'd say if she could see me now. Would she be disappointed in me for staying so long? For being so weak? Or would she understand? Would she hold me like she used to when I was small and tell me that surviving is its own kind of courage, its own strength? I made copies of everything, organized the evidence the way I used to organize his office files, methodical, thorough, impossible to dispute or deny in court. Bank records, text messages, videos, photographs of the broken belongings he'd destroyed over the years. I'd kept pictures of it all, cataloged them carefully. I'd started taking photos years ago, telling myself it was to remember what needed replacing. But deep down, I think I knew I was building a case eventually. Every broken dish, every shattered frame, every destroyed memento, I'd photographed them all, dated them, noted what Richard had been angry about that particular day. Looking at those photos now, arranged chronologically, I could see the pattern clearly, the escalation, the increasing frequency, the growing boldness of his destruction. In the early years, he'd apologize afterward, bring me flowers, promise it would never happen again, swear he'd get help for his anger management issues. But the apologies had stopped around year 10, replaced by justifications, accusations, subtle implications that he had somehow deserved it, provoked him, asked for it, really. By year 15, he didn't bother with explanations at all, would break something of mine and walk away without a word, leaving me to clean up the pieces. And I did, every single time, swept up the glass, mopped up the spills, replaced what could be replaced, grieved silently for what couldn't be replaced ever. Then I called a lawyer, not the family attorney who had been Richard's poker buddy for 15 years, but a woman who specialized in financial elder abuse cases. Her name was Patricia Chen, and when I sat in her office showing her the evidence, she looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years from anyone. Respect, recognition, the acknowledgement that I was a person with agency, with rights, with the capacity to fight back against what had been done to me. "Mrs. Foster," she said, her voice steady and professional, "your husband hasn't just been cruel to you. He's been committing multiple felonies against you, daily. The loan sharking debts, the insurance fraud, the systematic theft of marital assets, the conspiracy to defraud you of property. It's all prosecutable in court. But more importantly," she continued, leaning forward with steel in her eyes, "we can make sure he loses everything he thought he'd keep from you forever. I want him to feel what I felt," I heard myself say, and my voice sounded strange, strong, like someone I used to know a very long time ago. "We can do better than that," Patricia smiled. "We can make sure the whole world knows exactly who Richard Foster really is behind that nice guy mask he wears. The idea terrified me at first, going public, letting everyone see the shameful truth of my marriage, admitting I'd been weak, been a victim for decades. But Patricia helped me reframe it. I wasn't the one who should feel shame. Richard was. He was the abuser, the thief, the liar, the betrayer of vows. My shame was his weapon, keeping me silent, keeping me compliant, keeping me trapped in a nightmare of his creation while he laughed at my suffering. "What if," Patricia suggested, "we take that weapon away from him? What if we make it impossible for him to hide anymore, to play the victim, to spin the story?" Our daughter Melissa's wedding was 3 weeks away, the rehearsal dinner scheduled at the country club, where Richard played golf every Sunday morning, religiously. 200 guests, including his boss, his entire family, our children and their spouses, everyone who'd watched me be the perfect wife for 25 long decades. Patricia and I planned it with the precision of a military operation, every detail considered, every possible reaction anticipated and prepared for in advance. We filed restraining orders, divorce papers, criminal complaints, all dated and ready to submit the moment I gave the signal after the public reveal happened. I practiced in front of the mirror, trying to find the person I used to be before Richard systematically destroyed every piece of my self-worth over years. The woman looking back at me was older, grayer, more lined with worry and fear. But there was something new in her eyes now, pure determination burning. She looked like someone who'd made peace with a difficult decision, someone who'd counted the cost and decided it was worth paying for her freedom at last. I thought about backing out 100 times, thought about handling it quietly, privately, the way everyone would expect me to, the way society demands women handle abuse. But every time I wavered, I'd watch one of those videos again, hear Richard laughing about my pain, mocking my love, treating my humanity like a joke, and I'd remember that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman who'd ever stayed silent, ever believed the lie that private abuse should stay private. The rehearsal dinner started at 6 o'clock, golden light streaming through the country club's floor-to-ceiling windows, everything perfect and beautiful as planned. Melissa looked radiant in her white rehearsal dress, glowing with the kind of happiness I'd once believed in, before I learned what marriage really meant for me. Richard played his part perfectly. Proud father, successful businessman, pillar of the community, shaking hands and accepting congratulations with practiced ease and charm. I watched him work the room, telling jokes, slapping backs, being the man everyone thought they knew, and felt absolutely nothing but ice-cold clarity and resolve. He'd worn his best suit, the navy one I'd picked out for our 25th anniversary, and his wedding ring caught the light as he raised his champagne glass. That ring, I thought, watching it glitter, was the first thing he'd used to pawn if the loan sharks came for their money before I could finish him. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were celebrating a wedding, a promise of forever, while I prepared to expose how thoroughly Richard had destroyed our forever. At 7 o'clock, right after the salads were served, I stood up, my chair scraping against the polished floor, drawing every eye in the room toward me. My hands didn't shake as I picked up the microphone the DJ had set up for toasts, though my heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd like to share something with everyone before the speeches begin, I said, my voice carrying clear and strong across the suddenly silent dining room. Richard's face, he'll never forget it. Confusion first, then warning, then the beginning of fear, as he realized this wasn't part of the carefully planned program. For 25 years, I've been the perfect wife, I continued. Standing there in the rose-colored dress Melissa had helped me pick out for tonight's special occasion. I've cleaned up broken dishes, replaced shattered picture frames, apologized for making my husband angry enough to destroy the things I loved most in life. The room was absolutely silent now, the kind of silence that feels like held breath, like the moment before lightning strikes and everything changes permanently. I've smiled through it, made excuses for it, told myself it was normal, that marriage requires sacrifice, that love means accepting someone's absolute worst behaviors. Richard stood up, his chair falling backward with a crash, and started toward me, his face purple with rage. But his brother Carl grabbed his arm firmly. "But I recently discovered something interesting," I said, my finger hovering over my phone, connected to the venue's AV system via Bluetooth technology Patricia arranged. "My husband hasn't just been breaking my belongings, he's been breaking every vow he ever made, every promise, every illusion of the life we supposedly built." I pressed play, and the video filled the massive screen behind me. Richard and Carl in our garage, beer cans scattered around, plotting my complete destruction. "Shall crumble like her damn teacups," Richard's voice boomed through the sound system, and I watched the room collectively recoil in horror and shock at his words. The video played for 3 minutes, selected highlights from hours of footage, every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every detail of their conspiracy against me. People started standing, some moving toward the exits, others pulling out phones to record. Melissa sat frozen with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming freely. I watched faces change as they processed what they were hearing, the cognitive dissonance of matching Richard's public face with his private cruelty showing clearly. His boss's face went from confusion to disgust. His mother covered her mouth in shock. Our son gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. When the video ended, I kept talking, my voice steady even as Richard started toward me again, this time with murder in his eyes, pure, unfiltered rage. "That's not all," I said quickly, opening the Facebook app on my phone. "This story needs to be shared, don't you think, Richard? My darling husband." I pressed the button, going live. The camera pointed at Richard as he lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage, hands outstretched like claws. "Meet the man who gambled away your college funds," I said to our children, my voice calm and clear as Richard's best man tackled him from behind. "Meet the man who took out life insurance policies on me and plotted with his brother to make me sign away everything I owned before divorcing me cruelly." The live video was shaky now, people screaming, chairs overturning, silverware clattering to the floor, but I kept the camera on Richard as he fought wildly. "Meet the man who's been calling me worthless for 25 years while stealing everything I worked for, while planning to leave me destitute and completely alone. Richard broke free, swinging wildly, and connected with the best man's jaw, the crack audible even over the chaos, blood spattering the white tablecloths dramatically. That's when the security guards arrived, called by the venue manager, and Richard, still screaming threats, still trying to reach me, got arrested on sight. Assault and battery, the police officer said calmly, handcuffing my husband of 25 years while 200 people filmed it on their phones, spreading it live online. I watched them lead him away, still screaming, still trying to spin it, claiming I was crazy, that I'd edited the videos, that none of it was true, but the evidence didn't lie, couldn't be explained away. And every person in that room had just seen Richard Foster reveal exactly who he really was inside. The video went viral within 2 hours, 50,000 views, then 500,000, then millions. Richard's face, his words, his violence, everywhere online, completely inescapable. His boss called that night while I sat in Patricia's office signing papers, my hand steady and sure, to inform me Richard was terminated immediately with cause. The bank called next. Fraudulent activity on our accounts triggered automatic freezes. Everything locked down pending investigation of the financial crimes Richard committed. Our son called, his voice breaking, asking if it was all true. Had his father really been planning to leave me with nothing after stealing everything from us? Yes, I said simply, because there was nothing else to say. No way to soften the truth, no way to make it hurt less for any of us to process. The texts started coming in waves from friends, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all expressing shock, support, disbelief, anger for me. But the most satisfying message came from Tony the loan shark, the number that had started this whole unraveling with one careless text message weeks ago. "You win, lady," it said simply, and I knew that even the criminals Richard had gotten involved with had more honor than he did, more respect for boundaries. The police found Richard's connections to illegal gambling operations, to loan sharks operating across 3 states, to money laundering schemes spanning years of activity. Everything I'd documented, every crime I'd uncovered, every piece of evidence I'd carefully collected became part of a criminal investigation, spreading fast and wide. Patricia got me a protection order. Richard couldn't come within 500 feet of me, couldn't call, couldn't contact me through anyone else, nothing at all permitted. But I didn't need protection anymore. The Richard who terrorized me for 25 years was gone, replaced by a pathetic man facing serious federal criminal charges. Have you ever felt that moment when everything you feared suddenly becomes powerless? When the monster that haunted you is revealed as just a broken man? That's what I felt watching him on the news 3 days later, standing on the courthouse steps, trying to give some tearful interview about supposed misunderstandings. He claimed he'd manipulated the videos, taken things out of context, that he loved me and never meant to hurt me, tears rolling down his cheeks dramatically. But the internet is forever, and so is the truth when it's documented in your own words, your own voice, your own sneering face, confessing everything freely. His lawyer advised him to stop talking, but Richard never could resist being the center of attention, never could stop trying to control the public narrative. So he kept doing interviews, kept trying to explain, and with each one, more evidence emerged. More people came forward with their own Richard horror stories. The woman whose business he defrauded 5 years ago came forward. The contractor he'd refused to pay spoke up. The neighbor whose dog he had poisoned testified. Turns out, I wasn't the only person Richard had spent decades terrorizing. I was just the one who finally had enough, who finally fought back effectively enough. The divorce took 8 months, But Patricia was ruthless, documenting every penny Richard had stolen, every asset he'd tried to hide, finding absolutely everything. In the end, I got the house, what was left of our savings, his pension, alimony for life, and full restitution for the retirement funds he'd gambled away. Richard got probation for the assault, but the financial crimes, the insurance fraud, the conspiracy charges, those carried real prison time, 5 years minimum. He showed up to the sentencing hearing looking 20 years older, gray and hollow, his expensive suit hanging off his shrunken frame like borrowed ill-fitting clothes. "Your Honor," his lawyer said, "my client has lost everything, his job, his reputation, his family. He's been punished enough already by harsh public opinion." The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and no patience for nonsense, looked at Richard with something close to pure contempt burning bright. "Mr. Foster," she said, "you spent 25 years systematically destroying your wife's sense of self-worth while stealing her financial security and planning even worse betrayals. You created an atmosphere of fear in your own home. You weaponized your anger against someone who trusted you, who built a life with you completely willingly. The fact that your crimes have been exposed publicly doesn't negate the need for justice. It simply means the world finally sees who you really truly are." She sentenced him to 5 years, denying the request for house arrest or work release, sending him to medium security federal prison in another distant state. I didn't attend the sentencing, didn't need to see him one more time, didn't need closure because I'd already closed that chapter completely by myself. Instead, I was at home, the house that was finally mine alone, painting the living room a soft yellow that Richard had always said was too cheerful. Melissa came over that day, still processing everything, still trying to reconcile the father she'd known with the monster the overwhelming evidence showed so clearly. We sat on the floor, surrounded by paint cans and drop cloths, drinking wine, and she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for, patiently. "Why now?" "Because," I said, thinking about how to explain 25 years of fear and survival to someone who'd never had to live that way daily, I was already dead. He'd killed who I was so slowly I didn't notice until I found those videos and realized I'd stopped existing as anything but his victim, his target. The Helen in those videos wasn't a person to him. She was an obstacle, a thing to be managed and discarded when no longer useful to him anymore. And the woman who'd accepted that, who'd believed that was all she deserved, she had to die, so I could remember who I was before him, before this. Melissa cried then, grieving the father she thought she had, and I held her, understanding that my choice to fight back cost my children something important too. But sometimes the truth has to hurt before it can heal. Sometimes love means showing someone what they don't want to see so they can truly grow stronger. The months after were strange, learning to live without fear, without walking on eggshells, without calculating every word before speaking it out loud to anyone. I took a ceramics class, learned to make the dishes Richard had spent decades smashing, learned that I could create beauty with my own 2 weathered hands. I joined a book club, made friends with the women who liked me for who I was, not who I pretended to be, to keep peace or avoid violence from my husband. I traveled, spent 2 weeks in Italy, seeing the places I'd dreamed of for years, eating pasta and drinking wine and feeling absolutely free and alive. The house sold eventually. Too many ghosts, too many broken things haunting every room, and I bought a small cottage by the lake where I'd spent childhood summers. Some people asked if I regretted how public Ed made everything. If I wished Ed handled it quietly, privately, kept the shame contained as women are expected. But shame, I learned, only works in darkness, in secrets. in the silence that protects abusers while crushing their victims under the enormous weight of isolation. The moment I spoke the truth out loud, the moment I refused to carry Richard's secrets anymore, the shame stopped being mine and became his to carry forever. Did he deserve to lose everything? His job, his freedom, his reputation, for what he did to me, what he planned to do, what he'd been doing for decades? I used to wonder that, used to feel guilty for the completeness of his destruction, until I remembered all the things he destroyed of mine over years. Not just physical objects, though there were hundreds of those over 25 years of systematic abuse, but my confidence, my sense of safety, my belief in my worth, had systematically dismantled the person I was until I'd become a ghost in my own life, and he'd laughed about it, called it a clever control strategy. So no, I don't regret what happened to him. I regret that it took me 25 years to find the strength to stop accepting destruction as love or commitment. I regret that my children had to learn their father was a monster, that their wedding was the site of their mother's very public rebellion and justified revenge. I regret that I wasted so much of my life being afraid when I could have been living, truly living, on my own terms without constant paralyzing fear. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret choosing myself. Finally, after decades of choosing peace over dignity, survival over thriving, and truly living fully. The woman I am now, at 68, is someone I wish I'd met 40 years ago. Someone who knows her worth, who won't accept less than she truly deserves. She's someone who understands that love shouldn't hurt, that anger isn't an excuse for destruction, that marriage should be partnership, not ownership or control. She's someone who can look in the mirror and recognize herself, not the broken reflection Richard spent 25 years trying to create in his cruel, twisted image. Sometimes I get messages from other women telling me their stories, asking for advice, thanking me for showing them that it's never too late to fight back, never too late to leave, to fight back, to reclaim your life from someone who's been slowly stealing it, to choose yourself over comfortable, miserable survival. That's worth more than any amount of money, any viral video, any public vindication, knowing that my story helped someone else find their courage to escape. Richard gets out in 3 years with good behavior, and sometimes I wonder if he has learned anything, if he's capable of understanding what he did to me. But mostly, I don't think about him at all. He doesn't get to occupy my thoughts anymore, doesn't get to take up space in my peaceful new life. I've reclaimed every piece of myself he tried to destroy, rebuilt every shattered part, and discovered that broken things, when mended, can be incredibly stronger. The cracks are still there. I'm not pretending 25 years of abuse didn't leave permanent marks, didn't change me in ways I can't fully undo or forget. But the Japanese have this art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with gold, making the breaks part of the object's beauty and unique history. That's what I've done with myself. Taken the broken pieces Richard left behind and mended them with the gold of hard-won wisdom and self-love and strength. The scars are still visible, but they're beautiful now. Proof that I survived, that I fought back, that I chose life over slow death by systematic erasure. Now I spend my days doing things that bring me joy. Simple things I'd forgotten were possible. Reading without interruption. Eating what I want when I want. I paint, badly but enthusiastically. Fill the cottage with the bright colors Richard would have hated, would have mocked, would have probably destroyed anyway deliberately. I laugh louder than I used to. Cry when I need to. Get angry without apologizing. Exist fully without asking permission or calculating potential dangerous consequences. This is what freedom feels like. I realized one morning watching sunrise over the lake, and it had been so long I'd forgotten the feeling entirely, completely. It feels like breathing deeply, without fear, like taking up space without apology, like being completely yourself without constantly editing for someone else's comfort. It feels like coming home to yourself after years of being lost in someone else's story, someone else's version of who you should be for their benefit. My daughter visits often now, brings the grandchildren, and sometimes we talk about that night, about the rehearsal dinner that became her mother's dramatic liberation. She married eventually, a quiet ceremony with just close friends, and she made me promise to tell her if I ever saw signs her husband was like Richard. I promise her every time, because the best thing I can do for my children is teach them to recognize abuse, to refuse to accept it as normal. They're learning slowly to separate the father they love from the man he actually was, to grieve while also acknowledging the truth of his horrible actions. It's not easy healing from the revelation that someone you trusted completely was systematically destroying someone you loved, planning worse cruelty to come, but is necessary because the alternative is repeating the cycle, accepting abuse as normal, teaching the next generation that love includes destruction and pain. Some family members took Richard's side, said I'd humiliated him unnecessarily, that I should have handled things privately, kept the family secrets safely contained. Those relationships ended, and I don't mourn them, because anyone who thinks abuse should be protected for the sake of appearances isn't real family anyway. Real family, I've learned, are the people who see you at your worst and elevate you anyway, who celebrate your strength instead of punishing your painful honesty. The friends I made since, the people I gave led into my life, they're the family I've chosen, and they're worth more than blood that runs cold with judgment. I wrote a book eventually, not about Richard specifically, but about the pattern, the cycle, the slow erosion of self that happens in all abusive relationships. It's not a bestseller or anything dramatic like that, but women write to me saying it helped them leave, helped them recognize the signs, saved their lives. That matters more than any revenge, any public vindication, knowing that my pain, my story, my choice to speak up is helping someone else escape much sooner. If he'd stayed silent, handled it privately, the way everyone said I should have, Richard would have continued destroying people, finding new vulnerable victims to exploit. Now he can't. The world knows who he is, what he's capable of, and anyone who Googles his name will find the truth staring back at them forever. That's my real revenge, not the money or the house or watching him go to prison, though those things certainly brought their own satisfaction fully and completely. My real revenge is living fully, joyfully, unapologetically as myself, the self he spent 25 years trying to destroy, extinguish, erase from existence, completely and utterly. Every morning I wake up in my cottage by the lake, make coffee the way I like it, not how Richard insisted it should be made, and I smile genuinely. Not because my life is perfect. It's not. Healing is messy and nonlinear, and sometimes I still flinch at loud noises or sudden movements nearby me. But because I chose this life, I fought for it. I refuse to let someone else's cruelty be the final word on who I am or what I truly deserve. At 68, I'm learning what it means to truly love myself, to treat myself with the tenderness I gave everyone else while accepting scraps for myself always. I'm learning that saying no is a complete sentence, that protecting my peace is more important than keeping everyone else comfortable with my continued suffering. I'm learning that the opinions of people who've never walked in my shoes, never felt fear in their own home, don't matter, don't get to judge my choices. I'm learning to be proud of the woman in the mirror the one who survived, who fought back, who refused to die quietly like Richard desperately wanted. This journey isn't over, probably never will be completely. Trauma doesn't have an expiration date. Healing doesn't follow a neat timeline or predictable straight line. But I'm here, I'm alive, I'm free, and Richard, wherever he is, can't touch me anymore, can't hurt me, can't steal another moment of my precious remaining life. That's the only ending that matters. Not revenge, not justice, though those were satisfying in their own right, but simply being fully alive and genuinely free. The lake outside my window reflects the morning sun like liquid gold, and I think about how light only looks that beautiful after you've spent years in darkness. I have a routine now, small rituals that are mine alone, not dictated by someone else's schedule or mood or need to control every aspect of my existence. Awake when my body wants to wake, not when Richard's alarm will jar me from sleep at 5:30 every morning because he liked his breakfast ready by 6. I drink my coffee on the porch, watching the water birds dive for fish, and I don't rush, don't calculate how long I have before someone gets angry about something. Sometimes I don't get dressed until noon, just sit in my bathrobe, reading or looking at the water, and there's no one to tell me I'm being lazy or worthless. These small freedoms, they're everything. They're the life I was supposed to have all along before I met a charming man who saw me as something to exploit fully. I think about young Helen sometimes, the girl I was at 23 when I met Richard, so full of hope and dreams and trust in the goodness of people around her. She was studying to be a teacher, had just landed her first real job, was living with 2 roommates in a tiny apartment, and loving her independent life completely. Richard swept her off her feet, flowers every week, romantic dinners, declarations of love that felt like fairy tales, like everything she'd been taught to want from life. He proposed after 6 months, and everyone said it was fast, but true love doesn't wait. And she believed them, believed him, believed in the fantasy he constructed. The first time he broke something of hers, they'd been married 2 years. He smashed a vase because dinner wasn't ready when he got home from work late. She had been shocked, terrified. But he apologized so profusely, cried even, swore it would never happen again, and she believed him because she loved him deeply still. But it did happen again, and again, and again. Each time the apologies became less convincing, the justifications more aggressive, the violence more calculated and cruel. By year 5, she had stopped being Helen entirely, had become this other person, this careful, quiet thing that existed only to prevent explosions, to maintain impossible peace. I grieve for that girl sometimes, for all the years she lost, for the person she could have become if she'd run the first time he showed his true nature. But I also know that she did the best she could with what she knew, with the tools she had, in a world that told her marriage was forever, that leaving meant failure. The world has changed so much since I was young. Women have more options now, more support, more people willing to believe them when they speak their truth aloud. But it's still not enough. There are still so many Helens out there, trapped in their beautiful homes with their charming husbands, dying slowly inside invisible cages. That's why I speak up now, why I share my story even when it's uncomfortable, even when people tell me I should move on, let it go, stop dwelling. Because moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean staying silent. It means transforming pain into purpose, using survival as a platform to help others survive too. I've connected with other survivors, women who've been through similar situations, and we formed a sort of informal support network, checking in on each other daily. We celebrate victories, no matter how small. A woman who finally left, a woman who called the police, a woman who told someone the truth after years of lying, We mourn losses too, because not everyone makes it out. Not everyone survives, and we hold space for the ones who didn't live to see their freedom day arrive. There's a woman named Sarah in our group. She's 45. Been with her husband for 20 years, and she messages me sometimes asking if I think she's crazy. He doesn't hit me, she says, and I can hear the shame in her words, even through text. So maybe it's not really abuse. Maybe I'm just too sensitive always. But then she'll describe how he monitors her phone, controls all the money, decides what she wears, who she talks to, where she goes, every detail of her life. How he breaks her things when he's angry, throws her phone against the wall, smashes her laptop, destroys gifts from her mother, always things that matter to her specifically. That's abuse. I tell her every time. Financial abuse, emotional abuse, coercive control. It counts. It matters. You're not crazy. You're being systematically broken down slowly. I don't know if she'll leave. That's her choice to make when she's ready. But I want her to know that when she is ready, there are people who will help her. The cottage has become something of a refuge for women in our network. Sometimes they need a safe place to stay while they figure things out, plan their escape. I've had 3 women stay with me so far, each one at a different stage of leaving, each one carrying the same weight I once carried every day of my life. There's something powerful about sitting across from another woman and saying, I believe you, I see you, what he did to you was wrong, you deserve so much better. Something that shifts in their eyes, a tiny spark of hope or recognition or permission to believe that maybe they're not the problem after all. He is the problem. One woman, Maria, she stayed for 2 weeks, and when she left, she hugged me and whispered, You saved my life. You showed me it was possible to survive this. But I didn't save her. She saved herself. I just held space for her to remember who she was before he convinced her she was nothing without him controlling everything. That's what abusers do. They convince you that you're nothing, that no one else would want you, that you're lucky they tolerate you despite all your supposed flaws. They make you believe you're the problem, you're too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional, too much, when really you're just a normal person reacting to abnormal treatment. It took me years to understand that, to really internalize that Richard's treatment of me said everything about him and nothing about my worth as a human being. Even now, sometimes that old voice creeps in, the one that sounds like Richard, telling me I'm selfish, vindictive, that I destroyed our family for attention and validation. But Ave, learn to recognize that voice for what it is, not truth, but the lingering echo of years of psychological abuse, and I can talk back to it now. You're wrong, I tell her that voice. I didn't destroy our family. Richard did. He destroyed it the first time he chose violence over love, control over partnership. I saved myself, and in doing so, I saved my children from watching their mother disappear completely, from learning that this kind of marriage was normal or acceptable. My son calls me once a week now. We talk about everything, his job, his kids, his marriage, and he tells me he's more careful now, more aware of his own behavior. He asks his wife how she's feeling, really asks and listens. And when he's angry, he takes a walk instead of letting it explode all over everyone around him. I'm trying not to be like Dad, he said once, his voice thick with emotion. And I told him that being aware of it, working on it, that's what makes him different. And Richard never questioned himself, never wondered if maybe he was the problem, never took responsibility for the pain he caused. That's the real difference between them now. My daughter is more complicated, I think because she was Daddy's little girl. She saw the version of Richard he wanted her to see, charming and indulgent always. She struggles with reconciling those memories with the truth, with accepting that both versions existed, that he could love her and destroy me at the same time somehow. We're working through it together with a family therapist who specializes in trauma. And slowly, she's starting to understand the complexity of abusive people and their behavior. They're not monsters all the time, the therapist explained. If they were, no one would stay. No one would love them. They're strategic about when they show their cruelty. Richard was an excellent father to our children when it served him, when it made him look good, when it reinforced his image as a family man and devoted dad. But he was systematically destroying their mother, and they didn't see it because he was so good at hiding it, at making me complicit in the hiding of it. That's another layer of abuse people don't talk about enough. How abusers make you participate in your own erasure, make you lie to protect them from consequences. Every time I covered for the Richard, made excuses for why I couldn't come to an event because I had a black eye or broken ribs, I was helping him abuse me, not because I wanted to, but because the alternative, telling the truth, felt more dangerous than the abuse itself, felt like it would destroy everything I'd built. I understand now that I was trying to protect an illusion, the illusion of a happy marriage, a good family, a normal life, when the reality was a nightmare behind closed doors. But illusions can't be maintained forever. Eventually the truth breaks through, and when it does, you have a choice. Keep lying or finally face what's real and deal. I chose truth, and it cost me almost everything I thought I had, but it gave me back something more valuable, myself, my integrity, my ability to look myself in the eye. I've started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter. Nothing official, just showing up once a week to talk with women who were where I was years ago, scared and lost. I tell them my story, not to scare them, but to show them that getting out is possible, that life after abuse can be beautiful, that they're stronger than they know. Sometimes they look at me with skepticism, like I'm from another planet, like the idea of being free is so foreign, they can't even imagine it as real possibility. I remember that feeling, that sense that the cage you're in is the whole world, that there's nothing beyond it, that surviving inside it is the best you can hope for. But then sometimes a woman will come back months later, after she's left, after she's gotten safe, and she'll see me and just cry with relief and gratitude palpable. I made it, she'll say, and I always respond the same way. You made it, you did that, you had the courage to save yourself. I just showed you it was possible. The shelter director told me I have a gift for reaching women who've given up hope, women who've been beaten down so thoroughly they've forgotten they're human beings. I don't think it's a gift. I think it's just that I know exactly what it feels like. I've been where they are. I speak their language of fear and survival fluently. There's no judgment in my voice when they tell me they're not ready to leave yet, that they still love him, that maybe if they just try harder, things will improve. I remember saying all those things, believing them desperately, clinging to them like life rafts in a storm. And I know that judgment only makes women retreat further inward. Instead, I just say, okay, I understand. And when you're ready, if you're ready, there are people who will help you. You don't have to do it alone or figure it out. I give them my number, tell them to call anytime, day or night. And sometimes they do, usually at 3 a.m. when the fear is overwhelming and they need to hear someone believes. Those calls, they're hard. Listening to someone sob on the other end of the line, trapped in the nightmare I escaped, feeling helpless to do more than listen and support. But I take every call because I remember how alone I felt for 25 years, how desperately I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, wasn't worthless, wasn't to blame. The community here at the lake has been welcoming, curious about the woman who moved here alone, bought the cottage cash, keeps to herself mostly, but seems content and peaceful. Some of them know my story. They've seen the videos, read the articles, and there's a mix of reactions: sympathy, respect, curiosity, judgment from some as expected. A few women have approached me cautiously, told me their own stories in hushed voices, thanked me for speaking up, for showing them they weren't alone in their experiences. One elderly woman, she must be in her 80s, grabbed my hand at the grocery store and said, "I stayed. I never left. I wish I'd had your courage then." Her eyes were so sad, carrying decades of regret and pain, and I realized that my story had reached women who couldn't leave, who'd survive differently, in silence, always. I don't judge them either. Survival takes many forms, and every woman makes the choices she can with the resources and support she has at that particular moment. But I'm grateful that younger women today have more options, more awareness, more people willing to believe them and help them escape before 25 years pass them by, slowly. The anniversary of that rehearsal dinner came and went quietly. I marked it alone, with a glass of wine and a long walk by the lake, reflecting on everything. 1 year ago, I was still married to Richard, still trapped, still believing that maybe if I just kept quiet and small enough, I could survive until death parted us. 1 year ago, I didn't know about the gambling, the theft, the conspiracy, the videos, the years of plotting my destruction while I cooked his dinner and smiled. 1 year ago, I thought I knew what my life was, and then a single text message on a Tuesday evening shattered every illusion I'd built to survive the nightmare. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if his phone hadn't buzzed that night, if I hadn't seen Tony's message, if Eddie stayed in my comfortable ignorance forever. Would Richard have gone through with it? Would he have actually destroyed me completely, taken everything, left me homeless and penniless, laughed as I struggled to survive? Yes, I think he would have. The evidence was clear. The plan was detailed. He'd spent years preparing to erase me from my own life, from our shared assets and future. That text message saved my life. As strange as it sounds, a loan shark threatening my husband inadvertently gave me the key to my own freedom and survival from erasure. I've had moments of wondering if I should have done things differently, handled it more quietly, protected my children's innocence, preserved some shred of family dignity remaining. But then I remember Maria's face when she left here, that spark of hope, that possibility of freedom. And I know that public truth serves a purpose beyond revenge. Every woman who's reached out to me saying my story gave her courage. Every shelter that's reported increased calls after the video went viral. That's the real impact here. Richard's public humiliation wasn't just about punishing him, though I won't pretend I didn't find satisfaction in watching him face consequences for once in his life. It was about refusing to protect him anymore, refusing to carry his shame, refusing to participate in the lie that he was anything other than an abuser and thief. For 25 years, I protected his reputation while he destroyed mine, made excuses for him while he mocked me, kept his secrets while he planned my complete erasure forever. No more. That's what that video meant. That's what going live meant. That's what standing in front of 200 people and telling the truth meant. No more silence ever again. I reclaimed my voice that night, and with it, my life, my dignity, my right to exist as a full human being rather than an object to be used and discarded. The work I do now with the other survivors, it's not charity or obligation. It's gratitude. It's paying forward the miracle of my own escape, my own continued survival and freedom. I was lucky in ways that many women aren't. I had evidence, resources, a skilled lawyer, no young children to worry about, circumstances that made living possible for me. But even with all those advantages, it still took 55 years. It still took a catastrophic revelation. It still took every ounce of courage I had to finally break free. So I don't take my freedom lightly. I don't waste it. I use it to create space for other women to find their own courage, their own path out, their own liberation. The cottage is mine, fully mine. No mortgage, no shared ownership, no man's name on the deed. And some nights I walk through it, touching the walls in amazement and disbelief. This is mine, I think. These walls will never witness violence. This space will never echo with cruel words or breaking glass or my own terrified apologies ever again. I've decorated it exactly how I want. Bright colors, soft textures, whimsical art. Nothing Richard would have approved of. Nothing designed to please anyone but myself completely. There is a room I've turned into a studio. I'm learning to paint properly now, taking lessons online, and my walls are covered with my own increasingly decent artwork gradually. Richard would have mugged them mercilessly, would have called them childish, amateur, a waste of time, would have probably destroyed them in one of his rages eventually anyway. But they're mine. They represent time I spent doing something purely for joy, purely because I wanted to, and that makes them more valuable than anything we ever owned together. I think about legacy sometimes, about what I'll leave behind when I'm gone, what I want to be remembered for beyond being the woman who destroyed her husband publicly. I want to be remembered as someone who fought back, who refused to disappear quietly, who used her pain to help others, who chose truth over comfortable lies every time. I want my grandchildren to know that their grandmother was strong, that she survived impossible circumstances, that she taught them love should never include fears or destruction. I want other women to hear my name and think, she did it. She got out. She rebuilt her life. If she can do it, maybe I can too. Maybe it's not too late for me. That's worth more than money, more than property, more than Richard's prison sentence, more than any measure of traditional success or achievement in conventional terms. My impact is measured in lives changed, women freed, children who grow up knowing abuse isn't normal, men who learn to be better because they saw what not to be. Richard's legacy is shame, public disgrace, a cautionary tale about what happens when cruelty is finally exposed to light, when victims refuse to stay silent any longer for anyone. He wanted to erase me, wanted me to be nothing, wanted to take everything I had and leave me destroyed, broken, too defeated to fight back or even try to recover. Instead, I'm here, thriving, helping others, living a life so much richer than anything I had with him, proving that his assessment of me was always completely wrong. I wasn't weak. I was surviving. I wasn't worthless. I was systematically devalued. I wasn't the problem. I was the solution waiting for the right moment to emerge fully. Some people ask if I've forgiven Richard, if I found peace through letting go of anger, if holding on to resentment hurts me more than it hurts him even now. But forgiveness isn't something I owe him. Peace doesn't require pretending he didn't systematically abuse me for decades, and my anger is righteous, earned, and powerful fuel. I found peace through justice, through truth, through building a life that honors who I am rather than who someone else needed me to be for their purposes and benefit. I found peace through helping others, through using my experience to prevent other women from losing 25 years to men who see them as objects, not partners or humans. That's enough. That's more than enough. And if I never forgive Richard for what he did, for what he planned to do, that's okay. That's my right as his victim. The sun is setting over the lake now, painting everything gold and pink and purple, and I am sitting on my porch with a cup of tea, thinking about everything here. This time last year, I was setting the table for dinner, carefully arranging everything just so, calculating Richard's mood based on how hard the door closed when he entered. This time last year, I was small, afraid, invisible, dying slowly in a beautiful house with the man who was actively planning my complete destruction behind my back always. And now I'm here, free, alive, myself, watching a sunset that I chose to watch because I wanted to, not because I'd finished all my assigned tasks for the day. The transformation still amazes me sometimes. How quickly life can change when you finally decide you're worth fighting for, worth saving, worth choosing over peace or comfort. So I ask you, as someone who's lived through this transformation, as someone who knows both sides of this story intimately, what would you do in my position back then? If you discovered your entire life was a lie, that the person you trusted most was your greatest enemy, that love was really just camouflage for systematic destruction and control, would you fight back publicly the way I did, risk everything for truth and justice, or would you handle it quietly to protect your children and family reputation from scandal? Would you have the strength to walk away from 25 years of history, of shared memories both good and bad, of the life you built even if it was built on lies and manipulation? I'm not judging either way. Every situation is different. Every person's resources and support system are different. Every family dynamic requires different approaches and solutions. But I do want you to know that if you're living in fear, if you're making yourself small to avoid someone's anger, if you're being systematically erased from your own life completely, you deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve love that doesn't include destruction. You deserve to exist fully without calculating every word or movement around someone always. And if you decide to fight back, to speak truth, to refuse to protect your abuser's reputation anymore, there are people who will support you, who will believe you fully. Thank you for listening to me all the way to the end. This was my story, and every word here is true. Stories of real people in extreme situations finding real strength. If this story touched you in any way, please subscribe to the channel. I post real stories of overcoming, revenge, and justice every week right here for you all. And tell me in the comments, have you ever lived through something similar? What would you have done in my place? I genuinely love reading your stories too, always sharing. Click on the videos appearing on the screen now for more emotional stories that will make you reflect on life, family, love, betrayal, strength, and finding your own voice. Until the next story, remember that it's never too late to choose yourself, to fight back, to reclaim your life from someone who's been systematically stealing it from you.